Vashi Kapalos live from the West Block. On Parliament Hill this evening, the House of Commons has returned, and here's what it sounded like today.
When I left, there was a Liberal Prime Minister who was making excuses about breaking promises, running massive deficits, costs, crime, chaos were all out of control. Whereas today, we have a Liberal Prime Minister breaking promises, making excuses, running massive deficits.
I understand the Leader of the Opposition was busy. He missed the largest tax cut for 22 million Canadians. He missed the cut on the GST for new homes. He missed eliminating all federal barriers to trade. He missed, I hope I'll have another opportunity to finish a very long list of what the Leader of Opposition.
There is a lot for us to unpack in what you just heard. We'll do so over the next hour. Right now, though, we want to zero in on a big announcement from the federal government they made one day in advance of the House of Commons returning, a big housing announcement. Look on your screen right there. They have launched what's called the Build Canada Homes Agency. It will be funded to the tune of $13 billion. They are initially promising to build 4,000 affordable homes on federal land on 6 different parcels you can see in 6 different locations everywhere from Dartmouth, Nova Scotia to Winnipeg to Edmonton. To learn a little bit more about the launch of this and the federal government's plans on this crucial file, we are joined live in the foyer of the House of Commons by Gregor Robertson, the Minister of Housing. Minister, it's a pleasure to see you.
Great to be with you.
Thank you very much for making the time. The Prime Minister's, I should say, predecessor, Justin Trudeau, once infamously, I guess, said housing isn't primarily the federal government's responsibility. Do you think it is?
I think it's a key responsibility of the federal government. It hasn't been for about 30 years, since the mid-90s, and that's what's got us into the housing crisis that we have today. It's decades of not building enough non-market housing, which when you look at countries in Europe or Asia, there is consistently double, triple the amount of investment and non-market housing that's built in those countries. Canada, we're below 4% right now, which, and you see the litmus test is people are homeless across the country right now. Young people can't afford to get into the housing market. So we have to catch up from 30 years of neglect, basically. The federal government has a role, provincial government, and city governments, Indigenous governments, we all have a role to play, and we have to work together on it.
Is it your viewpoint, though, that addressing a lack of affordable or off-market housing is going to solve the bigger housing affordability issue? Like, is that what you're trying to say?
It's a key piece of the government responsibility. So the market is the market, and it will build housing at whatever people will pay for it. Governments are responsible for making sure that Canadians on lower incomes, Canadians who are struggling to make ends meet, can access a home. And when you add up that whole continuum of people, it's almost half of Canadians that are on lower incomes and struggling to make it. And that's where all the governments need to work together to collaborate and work with the private sector to deliver the housing that we need in the country. We ought to work with the private sector too. They're the most efficient builders typically on the market side. But I think getting a mix of market and non-market is what's healthy, and making sure the federal government is showing up and doing its thing responsibly.
Just to be clear, though, how are you defining those who would be able to access the houses or the homes that you're now saying the federal government will build? Because you're identifying, I think, one cohort of Canadians, but there are many Canadians who are working very hard, maybe not making low incomes, but middle incomes, who have no ability to access the market in either your hometown of Vancouver or Toronto, for example. What in this announcement addresses anything for them?
Well, this announcement is about making sure we're building housing across the affordable spectrum. So from people who are homeless, being able to get out of shelters, off the street, into transitional housing that has the health supports that can help them get stable. There's a big government role in that. That's obviously, those people cannot afford any rent at this stage. But there's a real need to address what we call the missing middle, younger generation who are, they're close to being able to afford market. They can't afford to buy, but they need a break on their housing. Affordability is defined as 30% of income of your before tax income. So we have to make sure that enough housing is getting built that meets that income test in communities of all shapes and sizes across Canada.
So I'm just going to repeat, though, because I'm not sure I understood completely what you were saying. So, for example, there's a two-income family in Toronto who are each earning, let's say, $95,000, not under $90,000. There is no way they feel like they can afford, and they're maybe in their 40s or they can't afford a house because it is just that expensive. Those are people who would benefit from decreasing value of the homes, for example, that people own. Is the reason that this announcement, this big launch, not at all focused on them? Because as you've once said before, those home values shouldn't decrease?
This launch is really all about making sure that there's housing across the spectrum, making sure that there is affordability for no matter what your income is in Canada. And that's the challenge that we've had is we've had some focus on very low income, homeless, not enough to keep up with that. Not enough focus on that middle market. That's been a big challenge, and making sure that we can have many projects with a mix of housing. You can have some market units and you can have some that are below market, and they support each other in larger units. So we can see investment from the federal government, working with provinces, cities, working with the private sector, and making sure that we're getting large-scale projects. We can use federal land. In this case, we have lots of federal land that we can leverage to build these projects as well, and making sure that there is a whole new supply of housing with a mix of affordability.
So is the thesis that you're going to increase housing units by 4,000 and therefore you're just increasing supply and that will overall impact affordability? Like, is that, because
Exactly.
Is that true across the country? Like, I would contend again in Vancouver, I'm not sure 4,000 units across the country will even make a dent in their ability to afford a home.
Yeah, 4,000 units is just the very beginning on 6 pieces of federal land. As an example of what kind of projects we're going to start supporting. 700 units in Nunavut, which Nunavut has a real housing shortage. So we want to see projects across the country at big scale. We need to double construction across Canada. Right now we build about 250,000 homes a year in Canada. We need to see that double. And we need to see a lot of that new housing be more affordable for Canadians.
But with all due respect, like the amount of emphasis your government is putting on this announcement is not commensurate with the impact it will have. Like I take your point, 4,000 is just the beginning, but there's no detail laid out about when the other ones are coming. It just says to an additional capacity of 45,000 units. Again, the parliamentary budget officer said there needs to be 3.2 million new units created over the next 10 years in order to just close the supply gap. That's not even restoring affordability. That's just closing the supply gap. How will this announcement do any of that? It just seems so tiny compared to the scale of the problem, which was the issue with the previous government.
Well, I think that $13 billion, I think all Canadians will agree, is a huge investment in affordable housing.
But only if it works. That's the problem, right? We don't know that it will.
The critical piece is that we bring private investment to the table. We have to get our banks and our pension funds, we have to get our private builders to the table. This is about catalyzing the industry to build more affordable housing. And we've been through market going crazy in Vancouver and Toronto for decades in Vancouver. We need to make sure that we're focused on more affordable housing rather than letting just the market try and solve it. The market has not solved our shortage of affordable housing. So making an unprecedented $13 billion investment as a country to scale up and partner at all levels, a Team Canada approach. I was with the ministers across provinces and territories last week. There's unanimous support for working together and delivering affordable housing in every province and territory.
I guess I would respectfully conclude by challenging the idea that because the government spends money on something, it will have a good impact on the problem Canadians are dealing with. And I'll again cite your predecessor, who launched in 2017 a housing initiative that had a lot of money behind it. In 2024, the last time the budget was delivered, also a ton of things. So much so that when I went through the list of things, it was almost identical to what you announced, save for the name of the agency and the fact that you will now be directly involved in building these homes, not just loaning out money. Like, at what point are Canadians supposed to just decide, well, the last ones weren't able to do it, so this one's we're just supposed to blindly trust this $13 billion is actually going to make a dent?
Well, it's not just the investment, it's also having a one-stop shop for affordable housing. We have
More
not
bureaucracy,
had this.
though.
No, but this is focused. This is focused on delivering that housing, bringing all of the partners together, catalyzing with the investment, but making sure that all of the partners across Canada can bring their projects in and say, this is what we need help on, this is what we need to get our projects built. We can invest, we can bring other capital together. That has not existed in Canada for decades, in generations, frankly, since the last time we had a housing boom in the 70s. So this is bringing a focused one-stop shop together to coordinate and invest in projects to build at scale.
And I take your point, and it's a fair point about the ambition. I guess I would just really quickly finally ask, could you tell Canadians tonight, it's $13 billion to build 4,000 units by when?
No, $13 billion is the overall investment that we're looking for in this budget.
And what will they get out of that, in concrete terms?
And that is getting us on the pathway to double construction in Canada.
But the pathway is not, what does that mean?
That means investing with our partners, with private sector builders, with provinces and cities and Indigenous nations and nonprofit providers, basically supercharging the housing system with investment and coordination to get affordable housing built, to focus on affordable housing. We're seeing unprecedented support for this launch in this last 24 hours that frankly tells me we're doing something right here. We have everyone on the same page as Team Canada, and we're going to deliver.
Okay, I got to leave it on that note. I'm out of time. Minister, a pleasure. Thanks for your time.
Great
I appreciate it.
you.
Gregor Robertson is the Minister for Housing. We have a lot more coming up on tonight's edition of Power Play, including, of course, our front bench, Brian Gallant, Lisa Raitt, Tom Mulcair, and Rob Benzie will be here a little bit later on. First, though, we'll go one-on-one with the House Leader for the Federal Conservative Party. Andrew Scheer is my next guest after a short break. Stay right there.
We are in a minority parliament, and we will be looking to all parties and all MPs for collaboration. Mr. Poilievre has a big decision to make. He can continue with the three-word slogans, or he can sit down and work on real solutions with a Liberal government.
We still have an immigration crisis, we have a housing crisis, we have a cost of living crisis, so we're going to oppose the government where it makes sense. We are going to support things that make sense, and we are going to expose what they're not telling us.
Welcome back to a special edition of Power Play, live from the House of Commons. You heard a little bit there from each party about their desire or lack thereof to work with each other in this parliamentary sitting. Let's get some more perspective now from the House Leader for the Federal Conservatives, Andrew Scheer. Hi, Mr. Scheer. It's good to see you again.
It's been a while. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. Thank you very much for making the time for the conversation. I wanted to start off today on the pitch your counterpart in the government is making, and I'll quote Steve McKinnon here. He asked MPs and Conservative MPs and voters to, quote, work together to, quote again, help make this country better. Do you see, from the suite of policies and pitches that they're making so far, something you can identify for Canadians tonight you would work with them on?
Mm-hmm. Well, we're hopeful that they're serious. We saw in the last Parliament the Liberals didn't operate this way. They were happy to have the House of Commons stalled rather than hand over documents relating to one of their scandals. So maybe this is a legitimate new chapter in that. But look, it's quite clear that Liberals had to steal Conservative ideas to get elected. They had to basically concede that Conservatives were right about the carbon tax, about easy bail causing crime waves, and about many other Conservative policies. So that's why we supported things like our idea to remove the GST off of housing. That's why we will support policies that they lift from our platform. Of course, we would support that. What we are on the alert for is when they graft their own tired policies that have been proven not to work onto those pieces of legislation, then it is our job to highlight that for Canadians and to give it all the due diligence that Canadians expect when they elect a minority parliament like this.
So in principle, does that mean, and obviously you'd have to see the specific legislation, I'm sure there will be issues in going back and forth, but in principle, does that mean on things like housing, on things like cost of living, if there are additional tax cuts, particularly, on opening up relationships with other parts of the world, that is stuff in principle that the Conservatives will support. And I ask, I understand the stuff that goes on here, and you have one take and the Liberals have another about why there was that stasis. But I think Canadians at home ultimately are impacted by that and no advancement of legislation or things that will impact their life. So on behalf of them, in principle, it's not like you're ruling out keeping them in power for a bit longer if there are pieces of legislation?
Well, I wouldn't describe it as keeping them in power. I think I would describe it as supporting ideas that we've already committed to. You touched on a couple of files there. So on tax relief, of course, we were the ones for a decade calling for an elimination of the carbon tax. That is absolutely something that Conservatives were fighting for, and we supported that. Removing the GST off of new home construction was a Conservative idea. Liberals voted against that when Pierre Poilievre proposed it. We supported that, and we'll support other things that lower the tax burden. Now, when it comes to building bureaucracies, which is what the Liberal plan is morphing into, they announced $13 billion to build a bureaucratic structure rather than getting out of the way of new home construction. Well, those are things that we can't support. We don't believe that Canadians, unlike the Liberals, we believe that Canadians pay enough in taxes. We believe the government spends far more than it should. The deficit numbers are already eye-watering, and we're hearing rumors that they could be even bigger than Justin Trudeau's last deficit. So on a case-by-case basis, when they bring in ideas that we've either campaigned on or committed or supported in the past, of course we'll continue to support that, but we will call out and highlight for Canadians the bad Liberal policies that are going to increase costs, drive up inflation, or put pressure on taxes going up as well.
I want to ask you about that and in general the budget, because it's more than even a signal. The Prime Minister essentially confirmed over the weekend that the size of the deficit would increase. Why are you inherently, and I understand a Conservative principle that you wouldn't want the size of the deficit to increase, but given the economic pressures we face, the impact that has on revenue because the economy is contracting, why are you reflexively against a deficit that grows? Like, doesn't it add up?
Well, first of all, I think we should go back and understand what the Conservatives are generally going to do this session. That is hold Mark Carney to his own standard. So he wrote his campaign platform knowing that Trump's tariffs were in effect. He budgeted that out, and he committed in his platform a much lower deficit number than what they're now talking about. He committed to capping spending growth, even in the throne speech, which took place months after Trump became president and a full month after the election campaign. So I believe it's fair to hold Mark Carney to the promises on which he got elected. He went to the Canadian people, made a written promise to them, put it in writing in his platform, and I believe it's absolutely fair to hold him to that. Secondly, when the government has to borrow more money, when it's borrowing billions of money, that means it's gobbling up money out of the economy. They are now competing with everyone else who has to borrow money. They're going to compete with you when you renew your mortgage or when you get a mortgage, when you negotiate a line of credit, when businesses go out and try to borrow to invest in the economy. Now they have to compete with the government. So that puts massive pressure on interest rates. It also means taxes at some point, either through the hidden inflationary tax, which we already see inflation going up, or with outright tax hikes, which Liberals have also done in the past. So it's not just that we have this allergic reaction to deficits. There's deep economic principles that Conservatives fight for when we oppose massive increases in deficits.
And I understand that. And I think back to the last time a Conservative Prime Minister increased the size of the deficit substantially. It was in a time of economic crisis, right? It was then Prime Minister Stephen Harper who essentially made that decision in order to combat stagnation in the economy, contraction of the economy, rising unemployment rates, all of the things that we see now. I take your point about them saying specific things in the election platform. It's why I have been asking them those same questions over the past number of months. But now we have some real numbers showing us the impact of what Trump's tariffs are doing. A contraction of 1.6% in the second quarter of the economy, 10% loss of business investment. Those are things that will for sure impact the bottom line of the government. Are they, as a result, supposed to just slash and cut? Because I don't know if Canadians have an appetite for that.
How about not invent new spending? The $13 billion in a new housing bureaucracy rather than just getting the government out of the way of new home construction. Massive increase in consultants. How about the fact that we're talking about business contraction in the economy, the billions of dollars that they've chased away with their anti-energy development laws. So
well, those are going away.
No.
It seems like they're getting rid of half of those. Yeah.
They've refused to repeal the No More Pipelines bill. They've refused to repeal the shipping ban, which basically means only Canadian energy cannot be shipped off our western coast. Other countries' energy can go up and down the coast. Only Canadians can. They've refused to repeal the impact assessment regime that they built, which was designed to get to a no. They vetoed Northern Gateway. They layered on all kinds of rules and regulations on the energy sector. And as a result, tens of billions of dollars have fled into other countries. The United States has signed over deals worth over $750 billion on LNG alone.
But
that's something that Canada could have done, and then we wouldn't be talking about a massive contraction. So between the spending that's being increased,
we would still be talking about contraction given our dependence on the States.
We would have been able to diversify. Northern Gateway would have helped us diversify off of the American economy. Trudeau canceled that. Carney cheered for that. He cheered on and applauded Justin Trudeau for doing that. So Canada, after 10 years of Liberal government, is more dependent on the United States for our exports.
It's actually the same. It's 75% of our exports then, 75% of our exports now.
No, but when you consider what it could have been, I mean, Northern Gateway was a real opportunity to get Canadian energy into Asian markets.
But it lost in the courts.
No. Justin Trudeau vetoed that.
No, it lost in the courts
Gateway
decided, and then Trudeau decided not to fight it. He didn't appeal the decision from the court.
Well, you say tomato, I say tomato. Justin Trudeau had the ability to see that pipeline through. He did not want it. I remember his speech when he explained the reason why he did not want Northern Gateway to proceed, despite the fact that there were multiple partnerships agreements signed by First Nations communities along the way, despite the fact it would have opened up Asian markets. He also stacked the deck against Energy East, which would have taken Western Canadian energy into Eastern Canadian markets, displacing foreign oil. So every way you look at it, the Carney-Trudeau Liberals, the policies that Mark Carney has kept in place, was designed to leave our energy in the ground. That is something that has made Canada's economy weaker and meant that the government has less fiscal capacity to respond to the United States.
My sense is, though, that what Carney has said and even started to do is conceding what you just said, basically. That I don't see him doing anything but trying to delineate his government. I'll tell you why, because he's saying that the Conservatives were right, is my takeaway, because he's saying we're going to get rid of the emissions cap, for example.
C5. Well, has he made the commitment that he's going to get rid of the
Well, he said to me he was open to it.
Okay.
Point blank, a number of months ago.
This is the problem with Liberals.
Let me finish. C5 is also meant to, on a case-by-case basis, move around those pieces of legislation. So if new LNG development or a new pipeline requires that the impact assessment not be used or the tanker ban not be in place, C5 is supposed to override that, give the cabinet the ability to override that. If they got rid of everything, we'd have no climate plan.
No, that's not true at all. I disagree. First of all, Mark Carney is proving up to be just another Liberal. One day, maybe he might be open to it. He's been Prime Minister now for 6 months. He promised to move at unimaginable speeds, and nothing really has gotten done. His major project list is 5 projects that were all either already approved or in some cases already underway. I mean,
not LNG Canada. The investor hasn't even made a decision on that yet.
What he's done with C5 is he's given himself the power to use what's called selective enforcement. That means instead of the market deciding, instead of investors deciding, yes, this project, yes, that project, no, that project, or the market deciding, Mark Carney is going to decide when the rules apply and when they don't apply. It's very dangerous. We want to live in a country where the market decides things. He wants to live in a country where he gets to decide things. And the difference there
Doesn't government have to send a message?
No.
That we're open for business.
No, but you send that message by setting up the goalposts and fixing them in one spot. And what we saw with this Liberal government over 10 years, that the goalposts kept moving and back and forth and side to side. What Mark Carney is telling some businesses, some selective companies, that, hey, you don't even have to try to kick the ball at all. And the difference in that is instead of pleasing the market, now companies are going to have to please politicians. Instead of letting the market decide, politicians are going to decide. That is dangerous. Every country that's ever tried has gone down that road, where politicians get to decide when the rules apply and when they don't. Leads to corruption, leads to lack of investor confidence, and it leads to companies moving out of those countries.
Even in a time of crisis, though, and I do take that point, but I know that your party has constantly cited this LNG terminal on the water in Germany as evidence of how fast things can get built. Germany essentially brought in their own C5 to override their own environmental laws in order to get that thing built, and it worked.
But why just for one company? Why not have an accelerated approvals process based on fixed criteria for everyone?
Okay. I'll leave it on that note. We'll let Canadians decide. Thanks a lot, Mr. Scheer. Appreciate your time as always. Thank you. All right, that's Andrew Scheer. He is the leader, the government House leader, I should say, for the federal Conservatives. We're going to take another quick break on this special edition of Power Play. On the other end of that break, our front bench will be here to unpack how day one went. Brian Glant, Lisa Raitt, Tom Mulcair, and Rob Benzie with me in just 2 minutes.
I'm not going to speculate on numbers or quantum. I'm just going to say that we have a deficit issue that has to be dealt with.
Canadian families have been tightening their belts for quite some time. The first thing, it's quite normal for the federal government to do the same.
Are there going to be cuts to the public service?
Our intention is to go through attrition, but there will be how can I say that? Adjustments to the public service.
You know, I've been through a few budgets, as you may know, and we can still continue to invest in social programs, continue to support Canadians where it's necessary, but we can find some savings, and there are a lot of things that I think need to be reviewed.
Various members of the federal government there weighing in on what the federal budget will look like. The finance minister had originally this summer said it was coming in October, but there are people behind the scenes telling me it could be as late as the first week of November. Will it be one of austerity? Will it be one of investment? What will it cut? What will it not? It was really the bulk of question period that went back and forth over that issue, this first question period of the return of the House of Commons, and it's a perfect place to bring in our front bench. With me this evening, former New Brunswick Liberal Premier Brian Gallant. He's now the CEO of Space Canada. Former Conservative Deputy Leader Lisa Raitt. She's the Vice Chair and Managing Director of Global Investment Banking at CIBC. CTV News political analyst and former NDP leader Tom Mulcair is here. And rounding us out, Benzie is back. The Toronto Star's Queen's Park Bureau Chief Rob Benzie is here. Hi, everybody. It's good to see you.
Hi, Ashley.
Lisa, I'll start with you. Do the Conservatives kind of smell blood on this issue? Is that why it informed a lot of the back and forth already?
Oh, I think so. I think for sure Canadians are thinking about their own pocketbooks. Therefore, they're going to want to know how the government's pocketbook is doing, quite frankly. And I didn't get much comfort from the answers from the ministers as they went in. I don't think that there's a cohesive narrative or message coming out of it right now. And on day one, you kind of have to have that. And I don't know who actually knows how big the deficit is. I think maybe Mr. Carney knows and Mr. Sabia knows. Maybe Mr. Blanchard knows, but I don't think that everybody actually understands the big picture on this yet.
Well, it keeps kind of evolving, Tom, right? Like there were very specific promises made during the election campaign about closing a $15 billion gap and public service through, caps but not cuts, maintaining programs. And there's been like some answers at some point given, other answers at other points given, and then finally like a punctuation point yesterday with the Prime Minister alluding to the fact that the deficit would be significantly bigger than last year. How do you think the government is navigating this one, and how do you anticipate the opposition will?
Well, it's how they leak it and at what level. There was a very important article by Joël Denis Bellavance today where he's very well plugged in with this government, and he was saying that he's been told it's going to be a $100 billion deficit. Now, of course, that can be a bit of a mug's game where you float $100 billion and, it comes in at only $78 billion. Oh, boy, we're doing a lot better now than we thought we were. I think that that's the type of game that we're going to keep playing. It was interesting over the weekend. I heard Mr. McKinnon, with Steve McKinnon, with you, Vashi, pretty clearly indicating that there were going to be cuts to the civil service, and it didn't take 2 hours for Mark Carney to be out there talking about, no, it's going to be through attrition. The tail end of the baby boom is all heading for retirement. Everything's going to be fine. The last thing they needed was a nascent war with the civil service unions, and I guess they peeled back from that one at the last second. All that to say that there will be a massive deficit. None of what they've promised is going to change any of that magically. They can keep pointing to Trump and everything else. But I often find Andrew Scheer difficult to follow. Today, I found much of his presentation and his logic spot on, and I think that's the type of critique that the Liberals are going to be facing throughout the fall.
Brian, what's your thought about the way in which the Liberals are attempting to telegraph what to anticipate with this budget? They're not shying away, I would say, from the idea that it will be the key thing that happens for them this fall, but all the different messaging around, is it austerity? I mean, in 1 week or 2 weeks, we literally heard it would be austerity and then also a bigger deficit.
Yeah. Look, I feel for them. I lived this. When we took office in 2014, we had to put several budgets forward that were essentially looking for some savings, looking for ways to be able to, yes, reduce some expenditures in some departments and some programs. And at the same time, we did invest in other things. We invested in things that we thought would help grow the economy and help sort of, improve the quality of life for New Brunswickers and deliver on services. So it's a tough message to roll, right? It's very, very difficult to be able to tell somebody that has only a few moments to listen to the news to see what's going on to say, yeah, we're making some cuts, we're making some reductions to our expenditures, and we're investing all this money into XYZ, right? So that's a pretty tough message, and I've lived it. It's very difficult, and I think to go back to your question to Lisa, the Tories are right to stick on it. I mean, what happening easily is people will be confused, right? They're going to be like, what's with all these cuts? And, oh, no, I don't like that they're doing X, Y, Z to whatever expenditure, but then at the same time, they're investing and the deficit's going up. So it's tough. And in our case, we were able over time to get the deficit to go down, but it certainly wasn't in year one that we saw any sort of big significant push. So that's sort of where they find themselves. I think, most important part about all of this will be sort of year two, if they can get there. And they start to show that things are going all in the right direction.
Benzie, Tom's point, for example, about the evolving message on the public service, I found really interesting because even Minister McKinnon would not, he would not rule out cuts, basically. And I asked on multiple occasions during that interview, I pointed out that even though there was attrition last year, that 10,000 public servants did leave the public service, spending went up because of salaries and collective agreements by $1.5 billion. So if they're going to reduce operational spending, I don't know how they do it just through attrition, but there are political considerations with their public service unions, for sure.
Well, exactly, Vashi. And I mean, we saw Bruce Fanjoy got to speak today, got to ask a friendly question. He, of course, is the Liberal backbencher who defeated Pierre Poilievre in April and necessitated the by-election that Mr. Poilievre won in Alberta. And Fanjoy was elected in part because people were, the Liberals managed to fearmonger that the Conservative government would cut the public service. And in the Ottawa area, that's a very, very tough pill to swallow. So I think they have to be very, very careful. I mean, McKinnon's of the National Capital Region, he understands what his constituents tell him. And I think the problem for them is they want to be seen to being tightening their belts, but do they want to do any of the tough things that necessitates? And I'm not sure that they do, Vashi. I think Carney may say he wants to have an austerity budget, but austerity is one of those things that sounds great in an editorial page article. It's less palatable, I think, when you're telling Canadians, here's the program you're not getting that you need because we're cutting this budget. That's very, very difficult to sell.
Well, and it also kind of brings us right back, Lisa, to your original point, which is you kind of have the sense that there isn't agreement behind the scenes about what exactly they were going to do when it comes to austerity, or even more specifically on the public service, hence the different messages from different people within a few hours on the same day.
So true. And I listened to what the last minister said, Minister Lightbound, because he is the Minister of Public Works, or that we know. And he said, he used the word adjustment, which if you work in that area, one of the big things is workforce adjustment programs that have to be put in place when you're actually not just doing attrition, when you're actually doing layoffs within the federal civil service. So for him to use that word to me, I kind of went, okay, they're talking a little bit more than attrition. But Tom, you had a really good point on attrition before, which is it's not the panacea, because what happens if one of the people who are leaving is like your chief electrical engineer, brilliant person, and you plan that you're not going to fill that because, it's attrition, they're gone now. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. There has to be solid choices about what position is being cut. You can't say attrition. It's not going to be. Last point, Vashi. Are we going to have this conversation until they bring forth a budget in November? Because it's going to be awfully boring television. Like, honestly, we can only tread water for so long.
I will put my heart into making it less so. Yeah, I will put my heart into making it less so. Last 30 seconds to you, Tom, on that.
Well, I think that we're all of one mind here. We're listening carefully to what they're saying. Normally, when Mark Carney comes out and he talks about austerity, that's kryptonite for politicians usually, because the people at the lowest rung of the ladder are the ones who are going to get hit by austerity, because they're the ones who depend on and rely on government programs. So what's been missing every time François-Philippe Champagne talks about cuts is to say, we will reduce the size of the government because it ballooned out by 40% under Trudeau, but we won't cut direct services to the public. I haven't heard them say that yet, and that's why the public is watching carefully and is quite nervous.
Okay, I'm going to take a quick commercial break. Our front bench is standing by on the other end of that break. They're going to analyze how this long-awaited matchup between Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the Conservative Party, who is now back in the House of Commons, and Prime Minister Mark Carney went down. We'll look at that next. Stay right there.
I thank the Prime Minister for calling a prompt by-election. I wonder if one day he might regret that decision. I wonder if he agrees that our goal should be a Canada where hard work is rewarded, where food and homes are affordable.
I understand the minister, or the minister, promotion. I understand the leader of the opposition was busy. He missed the largest tax cut for 22 million Canadians.
All right, a little taste of how things went down in today's first question period. The House of Commons is back. We're actually live tonight for a special edition of Power Play from the West Block. I'm here with our front bench, Brian Gallant, Lisa Raitt, Tom Mulcair, and Rob Benzie to talk a little bit about this matchup, this long-awaited Brian matchup that I know everyone has been on the edge of their seats waiting for because, of course, Pierre Poilievre, who has been in the House of Commons for a long time, lost his seat in the general election, came back in a by-election. So this is the first time, in effect, that the two of them are across the aisle from each other in the House. Your initial analysis about how it went?
Yeah, I thought it was kind of disappointing. I was hoping on either side that maybe somebody would just do something a little different. I found Poilievre to be exactly like himself in the sense he seemed like he had lots of confidence. He never lacked that. And you think to yourself, maybe the fact that he's just coming back to the parliament and hadn't won his seat and sort of had to go through that by-election, maybe that would have kind of humbled him a bit. Maybe the circumstances of what's going on in the country and the challenges that are being faced would have had him be a little less partisan. And then on the Prime Minister's side, I found that kind of like you'd expect. I mean, he was okay, but he's not really used to question period. He hasn't been in politics very long. For somebody who just started, he's okay, but certainly not a skill that he's mastered. I mean, he kind of ran out of time quite a few times, and that's a pretty basic thing you get used to when you're in question period as a minister, or leader of the opposition, and of course as Prime Minister. So I thought it didn't really resonate too much with me, and I thought it was a bit unfortunate that neither one sort of surprised me on any of those fronts. But of course, there's going to be a lot more sparring to happen, and I'm sure the Prime Minister will get better, and you never know, the leader of the opposition might change his tack at one point.
Who knew Brian was the hardest Dancing with the Stars judge out there? Benzie, I didn't have as negative a take. I remember of course, Benzie and I text all day. I was texting him. I sort of thought they both looked better for it. Yeah. I think that over the summer, Mr. Poilievre had sort of conveyed through his press conferences that nothing would change, and I actually thought that his tone was different, and to a degree. Yes, you're right, Brian, about the confidence and all that stuff. And I thought the Prime Minister did not take it personally in the way that the last Prime Minister did. Yeah. And so there was maybe it doesn't last, but I just felt both of them didn't look worse for it. That was just my sort of initial read on it. Benzie, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you, Vashi. I mean, Brian's not wrong in the sense that the Prime Minister still struggles getting in his answers in 30 seconds or 35 seconds or whatever he has to. He struggles with that, and we see that at press conferences. You and I talk about that a lot. He tends to ramble, and you can't really do that in question period. I thought that both Mr. Carney and Mr. Poilievre seemed enhanced almost by today. I mean, there was electricity there because of the anticipation, of course. But Carney actually almost had a sparkle in his eye when Poilievre was asking him the questions. It's like he needs him there. You know what I mean? He seemed much more into it than when Andrew Scheer was the interim leader in the House and was asking questions in the summer. Carney just didn't seem as engaged at that time. I think now that he sees his the actual pretender to the crown sitting, two sword lengths across from him, it clearly stokes him. And I thought Mr. Poilievre showed a level of warmth and self-deprecation, frankly, that he doesn't usually show. And I thought he had a good first day back. In a weird way, it's probably good for both of them that this went down the way that it went down.
So we have two experienced parliamentarians who have done this many times here. Tom, what was your read on the matchup?
I found Poilievre really good. I found that he had managed to shave down some of the rougher edges. You know, he had some sandpaper out to take care of some of the things that really can be quite annoying in his delivery. It's always snarky. There's always a little needling for the other person. He was more respectful, and he brought more respect to himself, I think, as a result of that.
Yeah.
I agree with my colleagues. Mr. Carney's going to have to learn how to manage the clock. And if I might, I'd like to add one thing that nobody's mentioned, which is Mark Carney's French. Mark Carney's French became a thing during the election campaign. I've always argued that it met the number one test, which is it's understood by everybody for whom French is the first language, but it became a thing. And I can tell you, because I taught translation for many years, that guy spent at least an hour a day all summer polishing his French. His once quite good senior civil service French was lost during his many years in England, in the UK. I mean, it was really less than what it used to be. Today, we heard Mark Carney speak French really well. Everything was good about his French. It was a big sea change. And it was interesting. I was watching Blanchette, the head of the Bloc, and he was almost thrown off by the fact that he was getting back such good, clear answers. The only thing that he had trouble with saying was standing up for Canada. He said that in English, but the rest of it was outstanding. And I'd say that, to put a number on it, he's gone from a 6 on 10 during the election campaign to an 8 on 10, which is only going to help him in his ability to talk to all Canadians.
Full Dancing with the Stars slew of judges on the program tonight, or whatever the reality competition is. Lisa, what's your score for how the two performed today?
So maybe I'm a little bit more cranky. I'm going to say they did fine. They did fine. But here's the thing, like the tone in the parliament should be reflective of what the country is facing right now. And we're facing some really big challenges. So what I think what put me off the most was I found them all to be a little too jokey, quite frankly. You can't tell me it's the biggest existential crisis that we've ever faced in our entire life, the worst deficit we've ever faced, but then it's smiling faces and jokes across the aisle. Stand up straight, stiffen your spine, look in the camera, tell Canadians the truth about what's going on and that you're going to manage it from both sides of the aisle. We are in a pickle. This is a really difficult time right now. I'm glad that they got the jitters out of the way, but don't coast on that. Like, let's go back to being a lot more, I would say, professional in the way in which you're approaching it. And I know I'm the biggest jokester there is, but I am, I want to see more.
Yeah, if we're in a crisis, it should feel like one, I guess. That makes sense. Brian, I wanted to also ask you, beyond just sort of the performance aspect of everything, I noticed certainly in our interview with Mr. Scheer and yesterday with Mr. McKinnon, again, like a departure from what we've heard in the past about working together, like just the overall tone toward each other, like leaving open that possibility much more than they would have if I did this interview 8 or 10 months ago. How much do you think that actually takes hold, like lasts? I don't know what the right word is.
Yeah, first off, I'm just happy Lisa was just saying that it was fine. So I thought it was the Simon Cowell of this panel here. So that makes me feel better. I'm not isolated. I don't think it holds. To answer your question very directly, I don't think it holds. To Lisa's point, that the time was certainly, I think, required that there be a lot more cooperation and collaboration. But I'm just pretty pessimistic that it actually stays that way. So knowing that Canadians would like that, a lot of Canadians would like to see that. You'll see it, I believe, different parties talking that way. And to be fair, Leader of the Opposition Party did say that a few times after kind of going with the jab right to Carney, but nevertheless, you'll have some of that happen. But I can't see that it stick. And going back to the first segment, a rough budget coming, maybe a second rough budget, and I just don't see people are going to say, yeah, we'll work with you through these tough budgets. I think it's going to not hold at all.
Yeah, fair point. Okay, I got to leave it there. I'm out of time. Guys, thank you so much for your time this evening. I appreciate it. Great to see y'all. Brian Gallant, Lisa Raitt, Tom Mulcair, and Rob Benziar, wonderful front bench. We'll take a quick break. More of our special coverage from the House of Commons continues after that break. Welcome back to Power Play. Before we leave tonight, we have some really sad news to share with you. You might already be aware of the news, but a legend really of this industry, and certainly for our network here at CTV News, has passed away. Beverly Thomson, at the age of 61, passed away after a long fight with cancer. She spent a ton of time, of course, hosting Canada AM, but also frequently actually guest host this program, Power Play. She guided Canadians for more than 3 decades, all in all, through historic moments, and you can see some of the amazing interviews she conducted right there. Here at CTV, she was known as kind, tireless, and a consummate professional. We'd love to share just a small taste of her decades of political interviews. Have a listen.
You could parlay that into a phenomenal political career if you wanted to, and you even thought about that in 2000.
People have asked me so many times, please run for political people, please run for office. It just doesn't seem to be my thing. I really like what I'm doing now better.
Yes, we hear abundance of caution, but it also sends shockwaves, to Canadians that the Prime Minister is in isolation. What can you tell us about that? Well, and Mr. Singh, we're about a week from the by-election, the all-important by-election. How are you feeling heading into that?
Feeling great about it. Lots of support on the doorsteps.
You say, the mantra of my life has been, when I look in the mirror, I am despaired. But when I compare myself to others, I'm consoled. Why despaired?
But nobody knows me better than myself.
If this doesn't go your way, how far will you push this? Will you push this to the Supreme Court and appeal?
Absolutely. We'll use every tool at our disposal.
When all of that you've been through, nobody knows better the toll it takes. Mm-hmm. You've got a granddaughter, a grandson on the way, potentially. Right. Very exciting. You've even said you're in a good place in life. Why would you consider running?
Well, that's a great way to ask it, because most people ask it the other way.
As you can see there, Beverly conducted some very memorable and amazing interviews, and certainly she is being remembered by everyone who puts this show together as really someone who made a huge impact on both our professional programs, our professional lives, but also our personal lives. I just want to send out our heartfelt condolences to her friends and her family. Our thoughts and our sympathies are with you. We will have lots more coverage on this story here at the House of Commons as it develops. Today is Day 1 back in the House, but there are many days left to go. A federal budget, the Conservatives and the Liberals pledging to work together on issues that matter to you. But of course, whether that actually happens could be an entirely different story. I'm going to leave Power Play there for the evening. Thank you so much for watching. We have lots more coverage ahead. Stay tuned.